You may have seen that Donald Trump wants to declassify Pentagon files related to UFOs. Hoping it's true doesn't mean being ready to swallow any old nonsense. So I would really like us to be visited by extraterrestrials. But well, when it's Venus, well, it's Venus. And now I'm going to explain to you what I think we can expect. And in 2 words, to nothing. We'll likely get a flood of reports, each more meaningless than the previous one. Infrared cameras captured something unknown, maybe just blurry footage, but that's exactly what we need. If you want people to dig into this and stop looking where Trump doesn't want them to look. But God bless America. It can't be used as evidence to prove the existence of extraterrestrials or the opposite. We'll be at the same point as we are now. And as this story suggests very well, even if there was something to know, you wouldn't know anything at all. So I hope we'll have something tangible, something concrete. Honestly, that would be awesome. There's no point coming here like, no, astrono-geek, you said bullshit. I didn't say nonsense. I'm just looking for real UFOs. Honestly, I'd like to have one for a change. Oh. I wasn't expecting anything, and I'm still disappointed. Subtitles. A few days ago, on May 8th, the Pentagon declassified documents related to UFOs as Trump had requested. And definitely not to distract people so they don't pay attention to his scandals, Honestly, I didn't follow that closely since I wasn't expecting anything. So I found out about it because on the same day, I shared the video with you about Robert Moriarty flying under the Eiffel Tower in a plane, and I started seeing completely off-topic comments about UFOs. So, the UFO lake and your yellow dresses from your videos, go ahead and debunk that. So, UFO lake must mean leak? Except it's not a leak, Leak means fuite in English. It's not a leak, On the other hand, yellow dresses, then it's plural, So that must be the right word. Me, friend. Me, come in peace. Well, yes, but still, at some point, let's not forget that I respond in the tone people use with me, I'm respectful to people who are respectful. If you find me condescending, go back to the source, Since the recent comments I've received are like, astrono-geek, you look like an idiot, now you know. Well, I don't see why I should respond politely to people who obviously didn't get scolded enough when they were kids. So today we're going to take a look at those Pentagon UFOs, and most importantly, we're going to see how to read a thermal image. Because that's what most people struggle with. Reading a thermal image without understanding it is like reading blood test results without knowing what hematocrit means. You won't understand much, just imagine things. Today we'll cover image reading and optical theory, so next time you'll quickly notice when a thermal image looks normal. So let's start at the beginning and go to the Pentagon's page dedicated to these files. It's on war.gov, war.gov.ufo. We call it the Pentagon, but it's actually the Department of War. So first we have the quote from the tweet of our dear Donald, and below, the description of the page. And that's already interesting. In response to President Donald Trump's directive aimed at ensuring transparency regarding information from the US government related to unidentified anomalous phenomena, in parentheses, UAP. Yes, so, speaking of parentheses, now. I see more and more people no longer talking about UFOs but about UAPs. UAP is the English equivalent of Pan-Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. But above all, UAP sounds military. Have you ever noticed that ghost hunters never talk about ghosts, but about presences, spectral manifestations, or I don't know what other nonsense? Have you ever wondered why they do that? Because deep down they know that hunting ghosts is ridiculous, and it creates a dissonance that's hard to accept. So they come up with other names.
Let's say the beings of the one. The beings of the one, it's easier than saying extraterrestrials because extraterrestrials, well, they've already found them. Or luminous beings, you've heard of those too. The beings of the one, well, we are beings of the one, except that we don't know everything ourselves. We simply say beings from another dimension, that's it, from the fifth, sixth, supposedly.
Well, UAPs are the same. Ufologists honestly know deep down that chasing after UFOs will make them look ridiculous if they talk about it around others. But since nobody knows what UAP means, well, it sounds serious. A UAP sounds like some high-tech thing like the latest secret machine from Northrop Grumman, you know, their UAP. But no, UAP is just the English version of PAN, which itself is the modern version of UFO. At one point, if you're looking for experts, aliens, just admit you're looking for aliens and stop hiding behind obscure words to cover up the fact that you know yourself that your obsession is ridiculous. Because if deep down you can't admit that in front of people, it's because you know it's stupid and you don't have solid arguments to defend your case. No, because if I saw a ghost, a real one like Casper or with a white sheet and all, or even not like that, but if I was truly convinced that it was really the soul of someone dead, I would own the term ghost 200%. Like, I saw a ghost. On the other hand, if it's just a door slamming and a Wi-Fi detector crackling, it's definitely harder to own up to it, so you have to talk about spectral forms so you don't look like an idiot. Well, it's the same with UAPs. When you come to talk to me about UAPs, I just feel like I'm reading guys who can't admit they believe in ET. At some point, just admit it's extraterrestrial ships. Or take a step back from your beliefs, I don't know. You're looking for extraterrestrial ships. Alright, but let's get back to it. The Department of War, with support from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, oversees government-wide efforts to search for, review, identify, declassify, and make public as quickly as possible historically resolved records and documents related to UAPs in the possession of the federal government. Alright, you'll see that for them, UAP has a much more down-to-earth meaning. This is a historic and unprecedented undertaking that requires coordination between dozens of agencies as well as the review of tens of millions of documents, many of which exist only in paper format and span several decades. Given the scale of this task, the Department of War will gradually release new documents as they are discovered and declassified, with new batches being put online every few weeks. In other words, we're not done hearing about it, but I'm warning you, I'm not going to make a video every time, okay? Because at some point, unless we're talking about quantum physics, I don't plan to make a series of videos dedicated to emptiness. So, well, who knows, maybe there will be things a bit more impressive than what we have now, right? But it'll still always be blurry, unidentified stuff. And so, the documents archived here concern unresolved cases, which means that the government is unable to definitively determine the nature of the observed phenomena. And here, we've got the key point. But none of the idiots who came to bother me took the time to read that damn header. This can happen for various reasons, including a lack of sufficient data. There's something flying in front of our drone's thermal camera that we can't identify, so it's an unidentified aerial phenomenon, or maybe just a nice bridge. But the fact that we don't know what it is doesn't mean it's anything extraordinary. Most of the time, this kind of sighting doesn't even get investigated. It's like we have something, we don't know what it is, and that's it. How do I know that? Upcoming TikTok videos, script is ready, just need a good background. And if the documents are classified, it's not because the phenomenon is sensitive, it's because the image as a whole is. The common point of all these images is their censorship, sometimes very significant. That's what's classified for the American government, not the white dots. So when a drone comes back from a mission with an image of white dots, we put the image aside, and it's classified not because there's a white dot, but because the image is full of sensitive information. We don't bother redacting it before release, we just classify it. You know what? Personal anecdote. No, let's finish the text first. The Department of War welcomes analyses, information, and expertise from the private sector. The Department of War will continue to produce separate reports on resolved UAP cases in accordance with the obligations set by law. This administration seeks the truth and shares its conclusions with the American people. Alright, there you go. And so, a personal anecdote. With an Aries, during my career as a YouTuber, I ended up seeing and hearing classified things and even handled files containing classified information. And I'm not talking about UFO debunking videos where I show declassified American documents, no. I'm talking about documents and information that would get me in trouble if I revealed them. For example, the report on the Sophia telescope. When we entered the NASA facilities, we literally walked past planes that we were strictly forbidden to film. And the guys made sure of it by never letting us out of their sight, not for a second. But you know me, right? When someone tells me not to film, I at least have to ask why. And then the guy was straightforward. Well, first of all, the planes themselves, I can tell you, it was nothing you haven't already seen. And I can also tell you that the guy told us he was testing very sensitive sensors and other imaging devices on them. In other words, equipment that can be used for spying. Most importantly, those images must not circulate online, simply to avoid any risk of reverse engineering by the opposing side. That's it. Well, classified information in general, that's what it is. Another example during my report in Istris, when I filmed the Rafales during the 100 flights, I was clearly asked not to film certain onboard weapons. Or actually, some nice toys were also stored on the ground, not on board, that I wasn't supposed to film. And honestly, I didn't feel like I saw anything there that I hadn't already seen elsewhere in public documents. That's what I said. And I was told yes. But as a precaution. So if I just show up and tell you that I've seen classified weapons, it sounds pretty amazing, right? But if I told you you've already seen them and they even have a Wikipedia page, though they're just classified as a precaution, suddenly it's a lot less impressive, right? Same thing in Toulouse. We shot some footage for the video about the automatic parachute, and when I sent the video for review, I was told to remove several images of prototypes that were in the background and are classified. And if I tell you classified prototype, it probably makes your eyes light up, but I was there and honestly, I wouldn't even make a short about it, you know? Like, I don't know, it wasn't that, but imagine a new tire model. Well, a tire from the future, you know, a tire. Except, when you've worked on it for 6 months, you don't want the Chinese to copy it from a YouTube video. That, along with other things I've witnessed that I can't mention without saying too much. But so, having seen classified stuff and information firsthand, guys, honestly, we're not in the X-Files here. So, I'm not saying there aren't some juicy things out there, but 99% if not more of classified stuff is boring as hell. It's classified just to prevent the other side from copying it. So I get how just the word classified impresses people. But seriously, it's just another fantasy. Those images, they're only classified because of the drone and camera information displayed on them. And now they have to go through the effort of taking them one by one and redacting them. But that's all. There's nothing else. That's the level we're at. It's a balloon or a drone, but we're not 100% sure. And anyway, we don't care, so when in doubt, it's unidentified. Period. So, well, let's go check out those files. There are 158 of them, and we're starting with PDFs. It's not as engaging as a video, but let's check it out. Alright, well, let's be honest, the file itself already looks amazing. If we made one for a movie, we couldn't fit more stamps on it. First page, same thing. Crossed out, underlined, stamped, and signed everywhere. Birth, it's wild. So it dates back to 1966, and it's a series of various documents about flying saucers. So, just a reminder, 1966 full Cold War, and at that time the FBI wanted to know if there was, yes or no, a threat to the United States. Especially if it comes from the USSR. So yeah, it's legitimate to ask the question. And, yeah. Alright, so it's 184 pages of all kinds of crap and mail correspondence. Alright, I'm not going to read or analyze this. Do you know why there were 400 million connections on this site in the first 24 hours? So, I just want you to imagine the number of people who came to dig through these documents. If, at the time I'm writing this, no one, anywhere, has revealed the big thing that's supposed to be in there, I don't see why I should spend weeks reading this. If I never read Madame Bovary because it was too boring, I'm not going to read FBI correspondence about farmers in Nebraska who saw lights in the sky. If anything happens, I'll talk about it. If something was in there, it would already be out. Come on, let's skip this and go straight to what interests us. Actually, no, wait. Second page, location, low orbit, source, NASA. Well, let's go take a look. It's a transcript of a radio exchange with Gemini 7. We have Borman saying, "We see a bogey." So just a bogey, it means that we see something. Literally a thing, you know? Not a craft, nor a plane, nor a ship. The translation of bogey is booger. We see something. And so Houston was asking in return if it was their booster that they had jettisoned earlier or a natural phenomenon. And Borman replied, "We have debris here. This is a real observation." Not a window reflection or illusion, you know? And so they go back and forth like that for a while. Lovell says there are lots of particles floating around the booster they have in sight. They're trying to estimate the distance by guesswork. Anyway. Things that shine in space. All right, next. No, wait, there's another one there. What should we prepare for?
That's a title that makes sense.
Okay, so it's Carol who wrote in a letter that she would like to have dinner with him and his wife during the week, and she attached a handwritten note from an actor who recommends the Cometa report. Alright, a couple of seconds on the Cometa report. I'll quote Pierre Lagrange in UFO. What they don't want you to know is that we don't have here a report produced by intelligence and military analysis specialists, but by people whose hobby is ufology and who want to give themselves credibility by showing that they are also engineers and career military personnel. Alright, that's enough. Next. Page 3, a video from Gemini 7.
Since then, we have copied the tape from the master tape here in the control center, and we are now ready to play it for you.
Well, failed abort, it's the audio transcribed earlier. Next. Well, the PDF's over there, right? I said it. If there was something to find, it would already be done. Page 10 finally has videos. Let's check them out. Middle East 2020. Well, I'm stunned. Next, Middle East 2020. Next, still Middle East 2020. All right, another one. South Africa 2025. Another one. North America 2026. This one is brand new. Okay, well, thermal cameras. No, not thermal cameras. Regular cameras first. Yeah, we'll talk about thermal cameras, but first, let's just talk about cameras in general. In a camera, as you can see, yes, there's a sensor made up of a very fine grid of photosites that emit electrons when they receive photons. These photosites don't distinguish between the different wavelengths of photons from near infrared to ultraviolet. So the brighter something is, the whiter it appears, and vice versa. But these sensors also see a bit of ultraviolet, and especially a lot of near infrared. We added a filter to block those wavelengths, but your image remains black and white at this point, just luminance data. The brighter it is, the whiter it appears, but without any consideration for color. To get color information, we use another filter called a Bayer matrix, and you need 4 photosites to make one color pixel. Then you have chrominance information. Color. Well, but at this stage, with just a sensor, the light comes from everywhere, so it doesn't form an image. You need to attach a lens. A lens that will focus the light and allow an image to be formed on the sensor. This lens can be a series of glass elements, just a handful in the case of a prime lens, or many more, up to several dozen for a zoom lens. That is, something that allows you to change the field of view. Yes, a zoom isn't something that magnifies. A zoom changes the magnification. But it can also zoom out to a wide angle. When you magnify the image, that's called a telephoto lens, and a telephoto lens can also be a zoom. But what you need to remember is that a zoom lens contains more lenses, so it's more expensive and more complex to make. An alternative to a zoom is to mount several lenses on your camera and switch between them on the fly. It doesn't allow for nice zoom transitions, but for a military camera, that doesn't matter. It lowers costs and improves reliability. Because a zoom lens is complex and fragile. These lenses are made of glass, and glass is never perfectly transparent. It sometimes creates reflections that come and go in the optical path when a strong light source is in front of the lens. This is known as lens flare, which tells us how many lens elements are in the lens. More lenses create more complex flares. Option number 2, instead of glass lenses, you can have a set of mirrors. In that case, we talk about reflector telescopes. Generally, we do that when it becomes too expensive to make lenses. Because glass is heavy, it takes weeks to cool down in the oven where they're made, and it creates chromatic aberrations that degrade image quality. In short, beyond a certain diameter, we prefer mirrors. But why do we need to make large lenses in the first place? Because due to the laws of quantum physics, light, which is a wave, diffracts when it passes through a hole. A smaller hole increases diffraction, making your image blurrier. So the more you want to see small details because your object is small, far away, or both, the more you need a large lens. Big lenses and big telescopes aren't just about showing off, or at least not only that, it's a necessity to resolve small objects. And so, my telescope. Among the many optical designs that exist, some require the presence of a front mirror, supported by what's called a spider. A basic Newtonian has a 4-vane spider, so by diffraction it creates 4 spikes on bright objects. The James Webb Telescope has a 3-vane spider, so it creates 6 spikes on bright objects. Well, that's for cameras in visible light. Now let's talk about infrared. On one hand, you have near-infrared, which is invisible to the eye but visible to sensors that don't have the infrared filter I just mentioned. And basically, these are surveillance cameras. They can't provide color information, which your eyes couldn't see anyway since it's shades of infrared, so they represent the world in black and white, meaning in terms of luminance information. The brighter it is, the more it emits or reflects infrared. But near-infrared is still a representation of the world that's very similar to visible light. Thermal imaging uses far infrared, and here the world becomes much stranger because what the camera shows you is information about heat radiation. Heat, basically. But basically, a thermal camera is like a regular camera, except instead of an array of photosites sensitive to visible light, you use sensors that are sensitive to infrared radiation. In short, bolometers. We've known how to make bolometers since the late 1800s, and thermal cameras are really nothing more complicated than that. Yet, if you've ever checked the price of a thermal camera online, you notice that it costs a fortune. Why? Because far infrared rays don't pass through glass? It's annoying since lenses are made of that, right? So thermal camera lenses are made of germanium, a metalloid that has the special property of letting far infrared radiation pass through easily. Except germanium is rare, and at 20,000 euros per kilo it basically explains the price of thermal cameras all by itself. But since far infrared rays have much longer wavelengths than visible light, the diffraction effect is even stronger, and all other things being equal. Moreover, a thermal camera will always produce a blurrier image than its visible light equivalent. So if you want a reasonably sharp image, you have to build a large lens with a lot of germanium, which costs a fortune. The alternative is to use a telescope. Except that the aluminum or silver coating on the mirrors doesn't reflect thermal radiation very well. For that, you need a gold mirror. Except here, well, you don't need solid gold. A thin layer is enough, just like for the James Webb Telescope. So all in all, even though gold is almost 7 times more expensive than germanium, well, for large diameters, it's still a better solution. And now, what does the image from a thermal camera represent? No, not the temperature. The amount of radiation. A thermal camera is not able to give you the temperature of an object, only the amount of radiation, without distinguishing the wavelength of that radiation either. But it turns out that when a black body emits radiation, it never emits just a single wavelength. And there is a correlation between its temperature, the wavelength it emits the most, and how much it emits it. That's what's called the Wien curve. And from extrapolating this information, we can deduce temperatures. But basically, the thermal camera just shows us what emits the most radiation without distinguishing between wavelengths. Next, how do you read it? Well, first there's a catch. Although you can see images in false color gradients, military images are most often in black and white, but white can represent either hot or cold. It depends on the setting used by the operator because one or the other can provide better contrast depending on the situation. We use thermal imaging because what we're trying to observe in a military context, people or vehicles, is generally hotter than the environment. So, generally, you end up with an image that has very little contrast, not always easy to read, but in the middle of which the important information for you stands out clearly. But, because it's still light, it's subject to the same phenomena of refraction or diffraction. So, the visual artifacts you get on a visible light camera, well, you also find them on a thermal camera. And knowing that, none of these videos is from before 2013, the year the DJI Phantom was released. So, for anything more recent, we have to suspect the possibility that it's simply a drone. And just to give you a demo, here's what it looks like in infrared. A drone heats up a lot, and considering the low resolution of thermal images, even on military equipment, unless we have additional information, we can't rule out the possibility that a spot in the image is just a drone. But since a spot is just a spot, we can't draw a definite conclusion from it. And that's exactly what the Pentagon refrains from doing, so they conclude that it's not formally identified. But don't confuse caution with an admission of the presence of extraterrestrial spacecraft. But still, not all of these points are drones. For example, with this video that has circulated a lot, Indopacom 2024, in this image, black seems to represent heat, so this white spot is cold. So it's not a drone. How do you explain it weaving between the wind turbines like that? Well, it's simple. It's actually not doing that. This image seems to come, like many others actually, from an MQ-9 Reaper, that thing there. The apparent movement of the point in the image is explained by the fact that it's not locked by the operator but followed manually. In fact, Mike West did the experiment, and when you stabilize the image, you realize that the trajectory of the white dot is linear in relation to the wind turbines, and it's the drone's camera that's moving. Even worse, it doesn't go behind. A frame-by-frame analysis shows that it passes in front. In conclusion, it's a cold object located at altitude between the wind turbines and the spy drone, and the drone's movement also creates a parallax effect. So the object itself doesn't move as much or as fast. The spy drone's movement creates this illusion. So we're probably dealing with a balloon here. What kind of balloon? Spy? Weather? Amateur? It's impossible to say based on just a single point. So it's almost certain it's a balloon, but 99 isn't 100, and we don't know what kind of balloon. So it's flying and unidentified. So a UFO. But again, an uninteresting flying object. And what's sensitive in this video to the point of classifying it isn't the white dot. It's the Ripper's flight information. Come on, another one. North America 2026. This one's recent too. Here, white represents sea, which means heat. So I know it's tempting to see it as light in the night, but be careful. Thermal imaging works both at night and during the day. Inverted contrast makes it look like this. This video doesn't give us any information about the time it was made. But if you look even just a little closely, you can clearly see a condensation trail behind the object. That, young people, is one or more airplanes, and the white dots are their nozzles. But what kind of airplane? Military, spy, civilian? We don't know. So it's unidentified. And so, a UFO. UFO is a catch-all acronym that by itself doesn't allow you to judge the quality of an object nor its extraordinariness. That's why I always insist on the term extraterrestrial spacecraft. And again, it's not classified because of the white dots, but because of the imaging system used. And well, maybe also because if one or more of those planes have, for example, violated airspace, well, that could be considered sensitive information. From what little we know, it could very well be a camera from an airbase where overflight is prohibited, and the plane didn't have a transponder. The information is a pain to disclose. So it's classified. But clearly this isn't what you expect from me, you're looking for something else. Middle East, 2013. Here, black represents heat. You can see the operator using several levels of magnification, but the camera doesn't seem to have any zoom. Between each shot, you see a nasty transition that really looks like a lens wheel turning. And this continues until reaching the highest magnification, which shows us an 8-pointed star. These are diffraction spikes. These are diffraction spikes, most likely caused by the presence of a spider in the optical path. How am I so sure? Because of this. This is a lens flare, and it tells us two things. One, there's a lens in the optical system, and two, the object is very hot, so it's very bright for the camera to the point of generating a flare. And if you generate a flare, you can't not generate a diffraction spike on a spider. I did try to generate a flare on mine, you know, but I don't have anything as hot as a nozzle. So here we have something very hot seen by a very sensitive camera. So the spikes are inevitable. So it's possible that they're not caused by a spider, but by a closed diaphragm, except that a closed diaphragm creates spikes that are all the same length. Here, it looks more like a spider in the optical path. So here's an example with what I have that's closest, a camcorder with an 8-blade diaphragm. If I switch the image to black and white and negative and I dazzle the sensor with a flashlight, this is what it looks like. So unfortunately, I don't have a telescope that would allow me to do the experiment. But at this point, I have no reason to think it's anything else. Because the information is classified, we don't know the camera model or its optical system. So sure, I can't prove it definitively, but you can't prove the opposite either. Alternatively, I have a reasonable explanation. And so this thing is most likely a missile moving away from the camera, more or less along its axis, which explains its apparent movement and the fact that it gradually gets smaller as it moves away. It's 2013 in the Middle East. A missile fired by who knows who is detected by the Americans, that seems anything but unlikely to me. And since it was fired by who knows who, well, it's unidentified, so it's a UFO. The trail it seems to leave might be real, in which case, well, it's just a trail, but I suspect it could also be a sensor artifact. Indeed, a thermal camera detects heat by heating up. But I saw this myself while shooting a short about wavelengths. A thermal camera can create a kind of image persistence when the sensor stays hot. Simply by filming a Raclette device's heating element from 1.5 meters away, so too far to get burned or even feel the heat, I ended up with a ghost image on my sensor for several minutes. An image that falsely indicated cold. But in this video, the object is very hot, like for example the nozzle of a missile. So is this trail the missile's trail? Maybe, but I don't understand why it's cold. Unless it's a persistence effect from the sensor, persistence effect which we know exists. So even though this image has been all over the media, I'm sorry, I don't see anything extraordinary about it. Alright, there are also photos, let's check them out. Page 11. FBI 2025, no location. I don't even know what to say. Hey, the guys who believed in that, honestly, does that kind of black and white crap convince you? No, because I still have some half-baked know-it-alls coming to explain to me about the UFO phenomenon. No, not the UFO phenomenon, sorry. The UAP phenomenon is real, so you're hammering home the fact that it's true that people see things they can't identify. Okay. How does that get us any closer to proving the existence or non-existence of extraterrestrial visits, for crying out loud? Seriously, is that proof of anything to you? That's a real question. If a guy tells you he doesn't believe in extraterrestrial visits, would you show him that and say it's convincing? Honestly, that would be like trying to prove the existence of life after death based on someone saying a door slammed shut by itself on a windy night. The claim that extraterrestrial spacecraft visits exist is an extraordinary claim. It doesn't fit within the paradigm of our current knowledge. So it requires evidence that matches the magnitude of the claim. So a spy drone that sees a dot on its thermal camera is not sufficient evidence. It's not evidence at all, actually, because 1,000 mundane phenomena could explain it. And by the way, Piquez, stop with the hypocrisy about UAPs. You're looking for extraterrestrial spacecraft. Stop pretending to be interested in drone prototypes or Chinese or Russian balloons. You're only fooling yourself. Are the Russians and the Chinese trying to spy on the Americans? Do they have the equipment for that? Yes. Do we care? Yes. Or not, actually. That could be the subject of an entire channel dedicated to it, right? But a channel about espionage. But we know, you and I, that's not what you're looking for. So, stop beating around the bush. A white spot on a thermal camera is nothing extraordinary. And the Pentagon never said it was anything more than something not formally identified. Obviously, the so-called Pentagon will keep releasing things at night in May. Damn, I was expecting a little better though. I wasn't expecting ET eating ice cream in Area 51, but honestly, I'm telling you, they'd really have to release something incredible in the future for me to talk about it, because right now, this is rock bottom for ufology. So, well, as usual, we're still waiting for proof of extraterrestrial visits to Earth. I stand by what I've always said, it would be excellent news. But for now, we're still isolated on a rock in the middle of a cold and sterile universe. And so, of course, yes, that's scary. So, I understand that it can lead people to seek refuge in more reassuring ideas. But, as I always say, it's better to have a harsh truth than a comforting lie. Look to the skies, stay astronomical, and see you next time.